bit of messing around with the camera. So tonight we are in Revelation, of course. Revelation, and we're on to a new chapter, chapter 20, which we've covered so much ground in this. You know, if you're watching this on YouTube and you go on our Bible studies, you'll see it's been at times really deep kind of studies we've done, you know, and we just stuck solidly to it, which I think is good. We've not sort of skipped bits, or you know, we've tried to deal with every verse really that we've come to. And tonight we're just doing verses 1 to 3 of chapter 20 of the book of Revelation. So I shall read that out to you. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. So, yeah, fascinating, isn't it? And at the same time sort of hard to picture. So you'll recall that we've already seen the destruction of the beast and the false prophet. I've gone through that. I don't really want to go back over that because I feel we've kind of done enough on that really. The kind of the evidence that I put forward and the interpretation is already out there. So now we are going to turn our attention to the one who is behind them, behind the false prophet and behind the beast. And here in verse 2, there's no doubt who's been spoken about, is there? The dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan. It's almost spelled out for you, you know, very, very clearly that that's who's being spoken about. And as I said before, those terms, the dragon, that old serpent, so the one in the Garden of Eden, you know, the one who, through his deception of Eve, brought about or encouraged them to disobey God. And there's those two images, the dragon and the serpent, and these images give us an insight into how Satan works, and we've seen this through the book of Revelation and through the interpretation that I brought to it, is that at times the church has been assailed by persecution, by brutality. So Satan as like a dragon, a powerful, ferocious, destructive beast. But at other times the church has been assailed by Satan in the form of a serpent. That is, it has been through subtlety and through deception and through blasphemous and false doctrines. And these are usually the two ways, even today, that the church of Christ is being assailed, either through fear of persecution, losing your liberty, or in some countries, losing your life. But also through some doctrines that should have been dealt with centuries ago and that were dealt with but are now reasserting themselves. So this is really important to understand that, you know, the devil, Satan, is an incredibly powerful, incredibly malevolent spirit, and were we to face him just on our own, in our own strength, you know, forget it. We've got no chance. So we see here that the picture that is painted and the language of the vision here is, however powerful Satan is, however clever he is, God is in control. So God appoints an angel to, quote, lay hold of him and to bind him with a great chain. So there is no doubt about the outcome of Satan's resistance to God. It's not like in the Star Wars movies where it's like, who's going to win? Is it going to be the dark side? Is it going to be whatever the other side is called? You know, it's not this sort of endless struggle. Who will win? It's like we know who's going to win. In fact, we know who's won already because Christ defeated Satan and defeated sin on the cross when he said, "It is finished." So there is no doubt about the outcome of Satan's resistance to God. God now instructs the angel to bind him and throw him into the bottomless pit. It reveals to us that God is omnipotent. He is all powerful. And I want to just illustrate that by looking at the book of Job. Many of you will be familiar with this passage. So it's Job chapter 1. And we'll start at verse 6, where we get this sort of glimpse into the heavenly spiritual realm. So verse 6 of Job chapter 1, it says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God," doesn't mean that God has more than one son. Sons of God is generally taken for meaning angels, because God created the angels. Therefore, we might, in a sense, say that they're his sons. "There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." Yes, let's read on a bit. Oh no, that's it. Yeah, that's where I wanted to read to. And then we'll just skip to verse 8. "And the Lord said to Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made a hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thy hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said to Satan, Behold, all that he has is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thy hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord." So why not quote that to you? Firstly, because it shows that what Satan does, God has allowed. And Satan does not have his own way. God is restricting what he can do. And God has always restricted that. A certain amount of things are allowed, certain other things are not allowed. And sometimes we're like, well, why would God allow that? But we don't have the wisdom of God to know what God is doing and how he is kind of bringing together all these different elements, all different people's lives, and what the end result will be. So it's important to see that God is still in control. And coming back to here, we see that actually some people think Satan is in hell, that's his kingdom. But it's clear from this passage in Job that Satan is not in hell. He is walking to and fro in the earth. He is causing whatever mayhem he can. And when the angels have to present themselves to God, Satan has to come too, because God is all-powerful, he's omnipotent. And then Satan does what he always does in this passage of Job. He questions Job's motives. He accuses him. He's saying, well, yeah, Job's such an obedient and godly man because you've blessed him, because he's got all these kind of, he was one of the wealthiest men in the East. So he then accuses Job of, if you like, he accuses his motives. And in Revelation 12:10, Satan is called the accuser of the brethren. So this is nothing new. And so God lets him afflict Job, but only so far. Again, you can see how God is in control. So, now in this passage in Revelation 20, we see that God commands Satan to be bound with chain. And we've got sort of similar language back up in Jude, which is just the book before Revelation. And it's a reference to the rebellion of those angels that took Satan's side against God. Verse 6 of Jude says, "And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day." You get similar sort of language in 2 Peter 2 verse 4, where it says that God delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Now, think about this for a minute. Does that mean that all the angels that fell with Satan are chained up and are not able to do any evil anymore? Like they're all completely incapacitated? No, because these are not literal chains. I don't think God actually got some chains made out of iron or steel or whatever, wrapped them round these spirits and nailed it to the wall or fixed it to a heavy stone. Now, I think these are metaphorical expressions that mean that God has put this restriction on them. If evil spirits had no restriction on them, just imagine the amount of carnage and destruction and suffering that they could inflict upon mankind. But I think there are degrees of restriction that God uses, just as there are degrees of hell. I think there are different levels of punishment. The angels which rebelled, for them it will be the deepest, darkest judgment. We also have this image of the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit seems to be a place of spiritual confinement for the wicked, another kind of dimension, I guess. The word in Greek is where we get the English word abyss from, the abyss. According to Greek scholars, the abyss is an unfathomable depth, and especially Jewish conception, the home of the dead and of evil spirits. So when we talk about things like this, they are beyond our experience. You know, we've not died, so we don't know what's beyond this life. All we know is what the scriptures tell us, what Jesus reveals. So sometimes our concepts cannot be definitive, but they can be enlightened by the scriptures. So you might remember that in Revelation chapter 9 that the bottomless pit was opened and smoke was released, and in that smoke were locusts representing evil spirits which worked through the Persians and their idolatrous doctrine. You might remember that teaching. But here, instead of releasing evil, Satan, who of course is the ultimate evil, is to be confined. And it seems that confinement is severe. We talk about degrees of restriction. This restriction is severe, because he's not just restricted by chains or by a chain, but he's also locked away in a pit, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And one of the questions that Christians want to know, and those who are willing to concede there might be different interpretations of the book of Revelation, is, well, has this happened yet? And if so, when did it happen, and how do we know it's happened? So we've been following kind of John Wesley's interpretation largely of the book of Revelation, so I will quote him. He says, "Such a time the church has never yet seen, therefore it is still to come." That was in the 1700s. I think it is still to come, even now. So it hasn't happened just yet, because this represents an unheard of time where Satan deceives the nations no more. This has not happened yet, but the Bible says it will happen. There will come a time. So we have a real Satan and a real God, but if you like, a metaphorical key and chain. And as I've said all the way through this teaching on Revelation, John is writing down the images of a vision. He's writing down what he can see, and it's in the form of a vision, in the form of a prophecy, if you like. The imagery, it's so bizarre in parts of the Bible. I say that with all respect, but it is so weird, isn't it, and so bizarre that there is symbolism in this. These are not kind of actual, there's not going to be, like, for example, it talks earlier on in in Revelation 5 verse 6. John says he sees a lamb who is going to open up the seals. It's obviously not a woolly lamb. The seals are not like wax seals that the lamb is somehow going to scrape with its hooves and open. It's not literal, but in it is symbolism that we can see quite readily. The lamb is Christ, the Lamb of God, because Christ was the sacrifice for the world. He's the sin sacrifice, just like the lambs of the Old Testament were used. So it's always worth just remembering that. Okay, so this is a vision. John is seeing certain images that are going to tell us something. They're going to give us some indication of what's going to happen. Is it likely that Satan is going to be literally bound for 1,000 specific years? I think, well, firstly, I don't know, but I suspect probably not. I suspect it's just a way of saying, well, Satan will be bound for a period of time that God has decided, and then he will be loosed again. So I think this also illustrates a problem with certain kinds of prayers. There are prayers in the sort of Pentecostal charismatic church. I was part of the Pentecostal church for years, so I've heard this on numerous occasions. You might have heard it as well, where people say, they pray, "We bind you, Satan." And it's like, well, how? How are you doing that? And for how long? Here, Satan is bound for 1,000 years for a limit. So if you say, "We bind you, Satan," then how long does he stay bound for? A day, a week, forever? And so I think, I am happy to leave this binding of Satan with God at his appointed time. And to whatever degree God wants to do that. But I think it will happen, and that will be a time that the church has never known before. But again, a lot of this is in the wisdom of God. You say, well, why hasn't God done it before? Or well, why doesn't he do it for longer? Or why does he just not loose him at the end? But again, this is the wisdom of God. We don't know how God brings everything to pass, how he brings one person's life into conjunction with another person's life and works his purposes through that. I always give the illustration of Joseph, he of the multicoloured coat. With Joseph, he is cast into a pit, and it is the plans of some of his brothers to kill him. But I think it's Reuben who says, no, don't kill him. We'll just leave him here. But then the next day, Reuben is absent, and we have the Ishmaelites or the Midianites coming across, and so they sell Joseph into slavery because they still wish to do him harm, but they've decided, right, well, we can't kill him, so we'll sell him into slavery. And Joseph is then taken into Egypt, and then eventually, through a series of situations, he becomes effectively the prime minister of Egypt. Now, God has worked, that was God's plan to get him into Egypt, but he uses human beings, he uses their faults and situations and what we might call happenstance to bring about his will. And that's what we don't know, how God is using all other people's lives to bring about his purposes for his church and really for the whole world. So that's well, let's see what happens. Let's see what God is going to do.